Alright, so you basically have a week left till the August SAT or whatever future SAT you do have, right? And you're struggling on these hard questions still. So basically, I've gathered hundreds of super difficult questions on the SAT and I just walked through every single one. So hopefully you guys can learn a thing or two and be ready for your next SAT. Alright, let's do some ratios, rates, and proportion type of questions. So, score band 7 once again. Hardest type of questions we can find here. So, let's get right into it. The speed of a vehicle is increasing at a rate of 7.3 meters per second squared. What is this rate in miles per minute squared rounded to the nearest tenth? So, we're going 7.3 meters per second squared. So, technically, we're going 0.004 miles per second, right? So what we're actually going to do with this number is we're going to multiply this by a minute squared. So since we're doing minute squared, it's no longer going to be 60 seconds, but rather 3,600 seconds. Divided by 1. So we get 16.3 as our answer. Okay, so for this question here, the table shows the distribution by location and power capacity of the 20 largest wind projects in the United States in 2013. The capacity of the nine wind projects located in Texas was 4,952 megawatts, and the total power capacity of the 20 wind projects was 11,037. Okay, so it's asking if each of these 9 Texas wind projects in 2013 had operated continuously for 24 hours at the maximum rate of power generation, approximately how many megawatt hours of energy would the 9 projects have produced? So this is how many megawatts it's doing. And it's saying of 1 megawatt is 1 megawatt hour. So really, what we have to do here is 4,952 times 24. And you would get 120,000 as your approximate answer. Okay, so here's a fun question here. So if 4a over b is equal to 6.7 and a over bn is equal to 26.8, what is the value of n? So 6.7 divided by 4 is 1.675, so that means a over b is equal to 1.675. Okay, now a over bn is not 26.8, so really it's going to be 1.675n 26.8, and 16 would be our answer. Or sorry, 1 over 16 would be our answer because it is on the denominator, meaning it can't be 16. So let me go over what I mean here. So if it's 1.675, right, over 1 over 16 would make it bigger. If it was over 16, it would make a over bn be smaller. But since we have a fraction on the bottom, we can make a over bn be a greater number than 4a over b. Okay, the density of a certain type of wood is 353 kilograms per cubic meter. A sample of this type of wood is the shape of a cube and has a mass of 345 kilograms. To the nearest hundredth of a meter, what is the length of one edge of the sample? So density is equal to mass over volume, right? So 345 over x1 is 353. So this is our overall volume. So now we just need to do a cube root. So I don't remember how to do a cube root on this. I can't lie to you. Let me take a look here. Cube root functions. If I find it. Cube root. There it is. Cube root and of x1. We're going to get 0.99 as our answer. Also, the quicker way to do a cube root is just CBRT. Forgot about that. Just remembered it now. That's fine. Okay, so a certain town has an area of 4.3 square miles. What is the area in square yards of this town? Okay, so it's pretty simple. We need to get square yards, so we're going to square the mile. So on each square mile, we have 1,760 square yards. So we have this many yards for each mile squared. So then we just have to multiply this by 4.36. And D would be our answer. Okay, so object R and S each travel at a constant speed. The speed of object R is half the speed of object S. So R is equal to half of S, right? And object R travels at 4x inches in y seconds. So it travels 4x inches, meaning S would travel 8x inches in y seconds. So which expression represents the time in seconds it requires object S to travel a distance of 24 inches? Okay, so it's pretty simple. If R would take 4x inches for y seconds, S would take 8x inches for 1 second. So really, it would just be 3y because 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, let's take a look at the question here. So, for an electric field passing through a flat surface perpendicular to it, the electric flux of the electric field through the surface is the product of the electric field strength and the area of the surface. Okay, so as I'm just skimming through this question, we can see that the electric field with strength 29 volts per minute passes uniformly through the surface. Okay, so I'm just going to write that down. So, strength is going to be 29, right? Okay, and we got the two adjacent squares. I'm going to draw those out really quickly. Okay, and we're saying 1 is 3 times more the amount of this. Okay, so, well, you just say 1 obviously. So we don't know the exact areas. So we can say the area of this is x and the area of this is 9x. Okay. Now, an electric field with the strength this passes through the surface, right? And if the total electric flux of the electric field through the surface is 4,640 volts times meters, what is the electric flux in volts times meters of the electric field through the large square? Okay, so first thing you need to see here is, alright, so 10x, because we're adding these two volumes, or not volumes, areas, we're going to set that equal to 290. I don't know why I put a multiplier. Okay, so times 29 is equal to 4,640, right? Let me drag this down here. So now x is going to equal to 16 because 290x is equal to that. And if you just divide those both, it's going to be x is equal to 16, right? Okay, so we get that part. Now what, right? So now we just want to see the electric flux in the larger square. So 16 times 9 is 144, right? So that's the area of the larger square. So 144 times the electric field strength, because the formula to find the electric flux is the electric field strength and the area of the surface. So let me get my calculator here. Alright, so 144 times 29, 44 times 29 is 4,176. So 4,176 will be your answer. So just to check. Yep, there we go. Okay, so the area of a rectangular region is increasing at a rate of 250 square feet per hour. Okay, and which of the following is closest to this rate in square meters per minute? So, like we did earlier, we're gonna have to do a little bit of rates here. So, I'm gonna bring out this real quick. Let's move on to this side. Okay, so we're at 250 square feet per hour. Okay, now we want to get from square feet to square meters. Okay, so that means 1 meter is 1 meter squared, I should say, is now 3.28 squared. So 10.7584. 10.7584 square feet. Okay, so these labels cancel out now, right? And this is per hour right here. So now we need to make this per minute, meaning we're going to do 1 per hour over 60 minutes to get per minute, right? So now we're just going to multiply all of this out. So 250 over 10.7584 times 60. So if I just put that in the decimals here, so 250 divided by that times 60, 0.39 will be our answer. Okay, this is the last question of our ratios, rates, and proportions. Yeah, so as you guys can see though, there's two different types of, well, not just two, there's multiple different types of proportion questions you can get. But one of the biggest things for these type of questions is just understanding how to write the rate, right? So we got one more question just like that. So a certain park has an area of 11,863,808 square yards. Okay. What is the area in square miles of this park? So if 1 mile squared is going to be 1760 squared, we're just going to divide this number with the original number given to us, and that's going to be 3.83 as our answer. So yeah, a lot of this is just understanding how to manipulate your numbers here, when you're supposed to square x and y. And some of these questions, right, like for example number 7 here, you're gonna have to do a little more thinking, right? And that's just how it is. This is the problem solving and data analysis category, which in my opinion is probably the hardest category on the SAT. But it's just important you understand how to do these questions and keep on practicing them. Alright, so this is a big topic here, and that's going to be percentages. There's actually a lot of difficult percentage questions that are always valid to show up on your SAT, so let's just get right into it. So Jennifer bought a box of crunchy grain cereal. The nutrition facts on the box state that a serving size of the cereal is 3/4 cup and provides 210 calories, 50 of which are from fat. In addition, each serving of the cereal provides 180 milligrams of potassium, which is 5% of the daily allowance for adults. Okay, so which of the following expresses P in terms of X? So which of the following here makes it so that when you have 20 of these servings, you get 100% potassium, is the question. So the only one that would make sense here is B, because for each one, you're getting 5%. So for 20 servings, you're going to get 100%. Okay, so this is a question that has shown up on a real SAT as well, in with obviously different numbers, but it's shown up and it's tripped up a lot of students. So let's figure out how to solve this question here. So the positive number A, right, is 2,241% the sum of positive numbers B and C, okay? And B is 83% of C. What percent of B is A? So A is 22.41, because remember, when we're dividing percents, we're dividing by 100, right? Of the sum of B plus C. Now, B is equal to 83% of C. So if I were to plug in B, we would get that A is equal to 22.41 times 1.83C, right? So 22.41 times 1.83 is 41.0103. So A is equal to 41.0103 of C. Yes. Now B is 0.83 of C, and A is 41.0103 of C. So essentially, we're just going to divide these two numbers. So A over B is going to equal to this. So divided by 0.83, 49.41, and you want to just multiply that by 100, so you get 4,941% as your answer. Okay, so here's a question I actually tripped up on. So, let's just go over this from the start. So this is an important topic to cover, and it's a standard SAT percentage question you're gonna see. So in 2012 to 2013, they sold this much, and 2012 to 2013 would be double the percent increase from 2013 to 2014. So you had to determine the percentage change between 2012 and 2013 first. So we did our new minus original over original times 100. So you plot this into Desmos, you get 5%. Now where I read wrong was I read that 2012 to 2013 would be like the standard in 2013 to 2014 would be double of the percentage change in the initial. So that's where I read wrong, but that's fine. Figured out the issue there. So if 2012 to 2013 was 5, and we're going to half of that percentage now, we increase by 1.025, so 2.5%, which means B will be our answer. Alright, here's another type of those A, B, and C questions. The positive number A is 230% of the number B, and A is 60% the number C. So technically C is 60% greater. So we could just say, so it's going to be 1A plus 1.6, 0.6A. So technically it's 1.6 of A, right? So 1.6A. So now we're being asked, if C is P% of B, what is the closest value of P? So if C is X% of B, meaning it's going to be 1.6 times 2.3, and if I just put that in the Desmos, we're going to get 3.68. Okay, so which of the values is closest to the value of P? So if this is 3.68, the closest one is 383, because we're multiplying this by 100, meaning this would be 368%. So 383% is the closest one. Okay, here's a quick percentage question I want to cover. So 210 is P% greater than 30. What is the value of P? Okay, so this is already 100% of itself. So here's how we're going to set it up. 1 plus P over 100 times 30 is equal to 210. So divide by 30 on both sides, you get 1 plus P over 100 is equal to 7. Now, easiest way to just do this is going on the Desmos, 1 plus P over 100, and then regress that to 7. So P is 600, meaning 600% would be our answer. Okay, so a similar question here. So the result of the increasing quantity x by 1800% is 684. What is the value of x? So x, being our initial number, is now added by 18x, and that's equal to 684. So I'm just going to regress this. 19x1 is going to equal to 684. X is going to equal to 36 as our answer. Okay, so here's a good question. After 20% of the original number of marbles in a group were removed, 360 marbles remained in the group. How many marbles were removed from the group? So here we know that for 80% we're at 360. So for 100 we're at x. So now we're just going to set up a little proportion here really, and let's just say A over 100. A is going to be 450. So meaning the initial amount of marbles were 450, but we're not done with the question here. How many marbles were removed from the group? So we need to do 450 minus 360, meaning B, 90, is going to be our answer. Okay, this will be your last percentage question for today. So the value of a collectible comic book increased by 167% from the end of 2011 to end of 2012. Let's actually pull this out here. It'll probably be better to just note this down. Okay, so from, let's say at the end of 2011, we're at $100, right? And that comic book now gets to 167% increase. So it's not a 1.67, it's a 2.67 jump. So when you're multiplying, if you do 1.67, that's 67%. 2.67 would be a 167% increase. So now we're at 267. And in 2013, we jumped down by around, let's see, 16%. So 16%. So now 267 times 0.84, 224.28. 28? Yes. So now we're being asked to find the value from 100 to 224.28, the net percentage increase. So this is where we do our new minus original over original. So 224.28, which is the new, minus the original, all over the original, times 100. Okay, so 224.28 minus 100 over 100 times 100. So that means A will be our answer. Okay, so today we're just going to go through a bunch of nonlinear function questions. So let's get right into it. So function f is defined by this, right? And a and b are constants. In the xy plane, the graph of y is equal to f of x minus 12 has this y-intercept, and the product of a and b is 320 over 7. What is the value of a? So let's see here. F of x is equal to negative a to the power of x plus b, right? So now I can just set up a little table regression here, and f of 0 minus 12 has this intercept here. So f of 0 minus 12 is getting negative 75 over 7, and a times b is going to be 320 over 7. So 320 over 7. Ooh, 320 over 7. And we get a as 20. So that means 20 is going to be our answer. There we go. Okay, next question. So this is also kind of similar. So the function f is defined by f of x is equal to a to the power of x plus b. And we're given that this has an x-intercept at 2, 0 and a y-intercept of 0, comma negative 323. What is the value of b? So this time instead of finding what a is, we're going to find what b is. So this is pretty simple. So we're going to use the table regression thing once more. So we're going to say f of 2 and f of 0. And we're going to regress that to 0 and negative 323. So now we get b is negative 324. So that is going to be our answer. Okay, so for number 3 here, here's a different type of nonlinear function question. So a culture of bacteria is growing at an exponential rate. Okay, that's a big word there actually. Exponential rate as shown in the table above. At this rate, on which day the number of bacteria per milliliter reach 5.12 times 10 to the 8th. Okay, so you could do this by hand, understand how much it's increasing by, and kind of solve it algebraically, or I'm literally just going to do all of these questions through Desmos. But Desmos is going to be the easiest way to do this question. So how do we do this? So we're going to plug in 1, 2, and 3, and respectively the other values. So 2.5 times 10 to the 5th, 5.0 times 10 to the 5th, 1.0 times 10 to the 6th. Okay, and see how it says exponential rate? So we're going to do an exponential regression. Okay, now stay with me here. So once we get this equation, I'm just going to set f of x equal to this, and I'm going to just plug in my choices here to see which one would give us 5.12 times 10 to the 8th? And 5.12 times 10 to the 8th is, I believe, 512 million. Yeah. So we just need to see which option here is going to give us that. So f of 5, that's 4 million, not true. 9 million, 64 million, nope. 11 million, 256 million. So that means D is going to be our answer. Now, another way you could do this, the way you shouldn't be doing it though, but say you didn't know how to Desmos this, you didn't know how to do this algebraically, you could be like, okay, it's doubling itself. So on day 1, 250, on day 2, 500, on day 3, a million, day 4, 2 million, day 5, 4 million, day 6, 8 million, day 7, 16 million, and so forth, right? But that is a way you can do it if you don't know how to do Desmos or algebraically, but this is the best way to do it. Let's just check this real quick. Yep, that's the answer. Okay, so in the given quadratic function, a and c are constants, okay? The graph of y is equal to f of x in the xy plane is a parabola that opens upward and has a vertex at the point h comma k, where h and k are constants, okay? And if k is less than 0 and f of negative 9 is equal to f of 3, which of the following must be true? Alright, so let's just type in the equation first. Ax squared plus 4x plus c. Okay, so vertex form is going to be a of x minus h squared plus k. Alright, if we want to, we can even name this g of x here. Alright, so the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this little information given to us here. So I'm going to say f of negative 9 is going to be equal to f of 3. So we're given the value of a and the value of c. And we can see that a is not greater than or equal to 1, and c is not less than 0. So D is going to be our answer. There we go. Alrighty, so for the function g is defined by g of x is equal to f of x plus 5. For what value of x does g of x reach its minimum? So f of x, we're just going to type that in, right? 4x squared plus 64x plus 262. And g of x is equal to f of x plus 5. Okay, so now for what value of x does g of x reach its minimum? We just need to find our g of x here. And it reaches its minimum at negative 13. So A is going to be your answer. Okay. Alright, I do want to point out these are the hardest questions we can do. One Prep essentially categorizes question bank questions by score bands. This is 7, which is the hardest ones you can possibly do. So we're just going to go through as many as we can here. So function f is defined by this function. Okay. Is equal to negative a to x plus b, and this is equal to this, and the product of this is 65 over 7. At this point, I think you guys understand how to do these type of questions, so pause this real quick and try to solve it out. Okay, so we're just going to do table of regressions once more. So f of x minus 15 and a times b, right, and we're regressing that to f of 0 minus 15. So f of 0, and we're regressing that to negative 99 over 7 and 65 over 7. And we're asked to find the value of a, and that is going to be 5 as our answer. So here's another type of question. So in the xy plane, a parabola has vertex 9, negative 14, and intersects the x-axis at 2 points. The equation of the parabola is written in the form y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants. Which of the following could be the value of a plus b plus c? Okay, so let's set up our vertex form first. So a times x minus h squared plus k is our vertex form equation. Okay, so now we're just going to put in whatever our coordinate gave us. So it's going to be 9 here and negative 14 here. So we need to set up this vertex form equation in this form. So in order to do that, we're just going to distribute the x minus 9 squared, and then multiply that by a. So x squared minus 18x plus 81, multiply all of that by a, subtract by 14. So now you're going to get ax squared minus 18ax plus 81a minus 14. So this is our a term, this is our b term, this is our entire c term. Okay, now we need to add these values up. So a minus 18a plus 81a minus 14 is going to equal to 64a minus 14. Okay, now here is where you need to think a little more conceptually. So if we put in our a minus x minus h squared, or minus 9 squared plus minus 14, right? Add a slider for a real quick. So a has to be positive because we want to intersect the x-axis at 2 points. So if I made this negative, as you can see, like even if I made it negative 0.0001, it's just gonna be a flat line. If I made it negative 0.5, just doesn't intersect the x-axis. It has to be a positive number. So 1, 0.3, all of those are positive numbers. So we need a to be a positive number. So whichever ones of these multiple choice like answers here give us a positive value for a is going to be our answer. Meaning, if we set 64a minus 14 equal to negative 23, we should get a as a positive number. So if I regress that, we get a is negative 0.14. So that's not true. Negative 19, negative 0.07. Not true. Negative 14, 0. Okay? And negative 12, that is a positive number, 0.03. And to double check here, if I were to let's remove this here. If I were to add a slider here and put in 0, you just get a flat line, so you know it can't be 0. So therefore, our answer is going to be D. Okay, so here's another type of question, but can be solved in like literally 10 seconds or less here. So the function f and g are shown here, right? When x is greater than or equal to 0, which of these numbers, like if I plug in 0 for the first equation, would 18 be the maximum? It's asking would the coefficient or constant be the maximum value, right? So let's just take a look here. 18 times 1.25 to the power 0 plus 41. 59 is going to be the minimum number. It's just going to keep on going up and up and up, right? So we know that our constant can't be our answer here. So for the first equation at least. So A and C get canceled out. Now for the second one, if you plug in 0, 9 times 0.73, 0, 9 is your maximum. So 2 is going to be our answer. Alright, let's get into some equivalent expression questions here. So if the square root of x to the 5th over the cube root of x to the 4th is equal to x to the power of a over b, for all positive values of x, what is the value of a over b? So really, it's going to be x to the power of 5 over 2 over x to the power of 4 over 3. 4 over 3. So now, you're actually just subtracting 5 over 2 minus 4 over 3 because you essentially have the same base for the x's, right? So now we need to find our least common denominator and everything, but Desmos kind of just does it for you. The answer is going to be 7/6 as our answer. There we go. Okay, number 2 here. For what value of x is the given expression equivalent to 70n to the power of 30x, where n is greater than 1? Okay, so, alright, so for this one, what we're going to do is we're just going to do 70 n to 1/5, right? So 1/5 times 1/6 squared, but 1/6, an exponent squared is just multiplying. So 1/6 is now just going to be 1/3, right? Now, we need to get our LCM here. our LCM is going to be, so it's going to be 3/15 plus 5/15, so that equals to 8/15, right? So now we're saying 30x is equal to 8/15. So really, x is equal to 8 over 450, or 4 over 225. Simplify. 4 over 225. That is our answer. Okay, so question 3 here. The expression 4x squared plus bx minus 45, where b is a constant, can be rewritten as hx plus k times x plus j, where h, k, and j are integer constants. Which of the following must be an integer? Okay, so right here, we know that h, k, and j are integer constants, right? So we know that if we were to divide b by whatever integers here, it wouldn't give us an integer as an answer. So a and b can be canceled out immediately. Now for c and d, what we can take a look at here is h has to either be 2 or 4, right? So regardless, if 45 divided by 2 is 22.5 and 45 divided by 4 is 11.25, you know c can't be our answer. And d can be our only possible answer. So d is going to be our answer. Alright, so this question is pretty simple. So the expression 1/3 x squared minus 2 can be rewritten as this, where k is a positive constant. What is the value of k? So it's our difference of perfect squares here. So x minus square root of 2 times x minus x plus square root of 2 would give us x squared minus 2. So that means c is going to be your answer. Oh, let's take a look here. What's the value of k? 2. Oh, sorry. It's going to be D as our answer here. That's my bad. Yeah, that's a very simple one to miss here, because it's going to be 1/3 times, because if we did 1/3 times the 2, you're going to get 2/3. That's not true. You have to do 1/3 times 6 to be able to get x squared minus 2. So that means our difference of squares is actually going to be x minus square root of 6 times x plus square root of 6. Yeah, my bad there. Okay, so I did this question through using a notepad here, and I realized it takes a lot longer than you really need to spend. So for a question like this, especially if it shows up at the end of module 2, you need to be quick. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this question on Desmos in around half of the time I spent on doing it by hand. So what you're going to do is you're going to put in sliders for x1 and y1. You can set it to a, b, whatever variables you want to here, but just randomly assign any values you want to. It doesn't have to be 1 and 2. It could be 2 and 5. Doesn't really matter. I just chose 2 and 1 because those were the first numbers that came to mind. But now, all we need to do is plug in each expression here and see which one is going to equate to -1. Now, yes, this sounds like it'll take a lot of time, but it saves more time than if you were to be doing it by hand. Because if you do it by hand, it's actually a lot of simplification you need to do, and it's a tedious process. So even though this question would rarely show up, it is easier to do this on Desmos in my opinion. Now, I'm going to go with an educated guess here, and I'm going to say A and B are probably not it. The reason I'm saying that is because I've actually already done this question. Just for time's sake, I'm just going to do C and D and show you guys the difference here. So plus 13 x1 y1 minus 8y1, and divide all of that by x squared 1 y1 minus 8 c minus 8 x1 y1. Okay, -1. So that's our answer. But you could do the same thing with D. Since it's the same on the top, I'm just going to change the bottom here just to show you. So x cubed 1 y1 minus 16x squared y1 plus 64x1 y1. That doesn't equal -1, so that's not our answer. Therefore, C is going to be our answer. Okay, so for this question here, it's easy to overcomplicate it, but it's actually really simple. So all you have to do is you just have to plug in 2x cubed plus 42x squared plus 208x. And if we know that x plus b is one of our factors, and we know that it's a positive constant, and we know that it has to be the smaller one of the values, There's 3 values we're given, but we don't got the 0. So there's negative 13 and negative 8. Okay, these are essentially our 2 factors. So we could do 2x of x minus 13 and x minus 8. That's what this graph is equivalent to, essentially. So, or yeah, roughly. So this would actually probably be like plus and plus here. Yeah, that's how you know the graph would be equivalent. So what is the smallest possible value of b? So if we know that b has to be a positive constant, which technically it is, so which one is smaller here, 13 or 8? 8 is smaller, obviously, so 8 is going to be our answer. For this question here, I'm sure you could probably do this on Desmos, but I actually found it a lot easier by just doing some simple division. So I'm just using synthetic division here. You probably don't need it, but this is the way I've learned it. So negative 2, negative 5. So if you put in 1, you're going to add 3, 1, 3, negative 2. So really it's just going to be x plus 1 minus 2 over x minus 3. And the only option that would make sense here is D as our answer. Okay, so the expression above can be written in the form ay squared plus b, where a and b are constants. What's the value of a plus b? Okay, so that's pretty simple here. So we're going to distribute this side, so it's just going to be 100y squared minus 1100. Right, and then plus 7532 plus 100y squared. So really that's just 200y squared plus 6432. So you just add these, so it's going to be 6632 as our answer. Alright, so for this question, what we have to do is we have to simplify this further so we can get it equivalent to ax to the power of b, and essentially find the a and b's so we can add them. So the first thing we can do is 6 times 3/5 x to the 45 to 1/5 times 2 to the 8th x 1/8. Now we're just gonna distribute these exponents to the inside. So 3 1 x 9 times 6 times 2 1 x to the 1/8, and that would be 18x to the 9th times 2x to the 1/8. So that's going to be 36x 9 plus 1/8. So that would be 73/8 times 36. Or in this case, we're adding, right? So 36 times 8 is going to be 288 over 8. And that would equal to, let's see, I'm just going to put that in Desmos. That's just a lot of adding here, right? Plus 73 over 8. It's 45.125, so I'm going to round that to 45.13. Yep, that is our answer. Alright, so for this question here, we can just graph it. So if we know that k minus x is a factor of the expression, where n and k are constants, essentially we're going to have 2 factors. Or it needs to cross through the x-axis at least, right? So negative x squared plus 1 over 29 and k squared, we can add a slider for each one. K just has to be greater than 0, so I can keep it at 1. And we're just going to test out our n values here. So negative 29 doesn't cross through the x-axis, so that's not an option. Negative 1 over 29 doesn't cross through, that's not an option. 1 over 29 doesn't cross through, that's not an option. And 29, it's our last one, and it indeed does cross through. So therefore 29 is our answer. Alright, so this is the last equivalent expression question here. So we need to find b as a positive integer constant, right? So if x plus 2b is one of our factors, we see that in every single trinomial here, there's a 3x squared. So that means 3x is going to be part of our second factor. And I think it has to be a plus 7 because there's always a 14b in every single trinomial. So that's how you can set that up. Then you're going to distribute this. So 3x squared plus 6xb. Plus 6bx, I should say, 6bx plus 7x plus 14, right? So 14b. So now what I can do is I can actually factor this part out. So I can do 3x squared plus 6b plus 7x plus 14b. Okay? Now, this 6b plus 7 is essentially our coefficient part now. So 6b plus 7 can either equal to 7, 28, 42, or 49. So this is where we're going to use Desmos. So 6b plus 7 regress to 7. B would be 0. It's not a positive energy constant. 6b plus 7 regress to 28. It's 3.5. That is not a positive energy constant. Now 42. Not a positive energy constant. And 49. That is a positive energy constant. 7. Positive 7. So D is our answer. Okay, that is the equivalent expression section. Alright, hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Let's take a little bit of a break and get into some reading stuff. Let's do some text structure and purpose questions. Okay, so let's read the question here. So which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence as a whole? So I'm going to just highlight this and I'm going to get back to it. So let's read the whole thing first. So Lily had no real intimacy with nature, but she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to a scene which was the fitting background of her own sensations. The landscape outspread below her seemed like an enlargement of her present mood, and she found something of herself in its calmness, its breath, its long free reaches. So basically, we're being told that um of her own, like, the landscape out there is um kind of relating to her own emotions. Like, if she's calm, the landscape is kind of reminding her of the calmness. That's what we're getting out of this so far. And on the nearer slopes, the sugar maple trees wavered like pyres of light. Lower down was a massing of gray orchards, and here and there the lingering green of an oak grove. Okay, so let's take a look at the options here. So it creates a detailed image of the physical setting in a scene. The landscape outspread below her seemed like an enlargement of her present mood, and she found something of herself in its calmness, its breath, its long free reaches. She relates to it a lot, but in terms of detailed physically, I wouldn't be able to see that because emotions are internal, so that's not right. It establishes that a character is experiencing an internal conflict. Well, there's no conflict here. She seems happy and she can find herself within this. Okay. It makes an assertion that the next sentence then expands on. Doesn't sound right. It illustrates an idea that is introduced in the previous sentence. Yes, because she had a passion for the appropriate and could be keenly sensitive to a scene which was the fitting background of her own sensations. And then that sentence went on to talk about this. So let's pick D as our answer. There we go. Okay, so we're trying to find the overall structure of the text, so let's break this down here. So mathematician Claude Shannon is widely regarded as a foundational figure of informational theory. Okay, so informational theory, foundational figure, right? That's the first thing I'm gonna highlight. His most important paper was published when he was employed in Bell Labs, and it utilized a concept called binary digit to measure the amount of information in any signal, right? And determine the fastest rate at which information could be transmitted while still being reliably decipherable. Technically, you could highlight the whole thing if you wanted to, but I'm just highlighting the concept and um, his impact in information theory, right? Um, Robert Gallagher, one of Shannon's colleagues, said that the bit was Shannon's discovery, and from it, the whole communications revolution has sprung. So essentially, he's a foundational figure. He utilized this concept, and because of that, the whole communication revolution has sprung. So let's take a look at our options. It presents a theoretical concept, illustrates how the name of the concept has changed, and shows how the name has entered common usage. That doesn't make sense at all. Um, it introduces a respective researcher, describes an aspect of his work, and suggests why the work is historically significant. Sounds right, but let's keep going. It names the company where an important mathematician worked. Okay, I'm gonna cross that out immediately because no company was named. It mentions a paper, offers a summary of the paper's findings, and presents a researcher's commentary on the paper. Yeah, but structurally speaking, this is the B is the best one because it's telling us exactly how it's being structured. It's saying, okay, a researcher, we're introducing this guy, we're introducing the concept, and we're introducing the significance. Okay, so I would say B is the best answer. There we go. All right, let's take a look at this question here. So we're being asked to show how this line here has to do with the overall structure, right? So let's just read this real quick. So perhaps 10-year-old John was a puzzling to the folk there in Florida woods, for he was an imaginative child and fond of daydreams. The St. John River flowed a scarce 300 feet from his back door. On its banks at the point grow numerous plants, luxuriant magnolias and bay trees. On the bosom of the street float millions of delicately colored hyacinths. John Redding loved to wander down the water's edge and casting in dry twigs, watching them sail away downstream to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and he wanted to follow them. Okay, so let's take a look at our options. A. It provides an extended description of a location that John likes to visit. Yeah, but the structure, like if we're talking about the underlined sentence as a text as a whole, I wouldn't say this makes sense because we're not talking about the location. We're more so talking about him as a person. It reveals that some residents of Johnstown are confused by his behavior. Well, there's nothing that says anything about that or even implies the confusion. So B can't be our answer. It illustrates the uniqueness of John's imagination compared to the imaginations of other children. There's no comparison, really. And it suggests that John longs to experience a larger life outside the Florida woods. That makes sense because he watched them sail downstream to Jacksonville, the sea, the wide world, and he wanted to follow them. He was a child that was imaginative and fond of daydreams, and he liked to wander down the water's edge, as it says here, and it shows that he liked to wander in general. So we're gonna say D is our answer. There we go. Alright, so we're trying to find the main purpose of the text here, so let's take a look at the text. So, a number of indigenous politicians have been elected to the United States Congress since 2000 as members of the country's two established political parties. In Canada and several Latin American countries, on the other hand, indigenous people have formed their own political parties, okay, to advance candidates who will advocate for their interests for their communities. Okay, this movement has been particularly successful in Ecuador, where Guadalupe Lori, a member of the indigenous party known as the Pachakutik, was elected president of the National Assembly in 2021. So, essentially, we're seeing two different things here. So, in the United States Congress, we see that in the two established political parties, indigenous politicians have been coming through in Congress through those parties. But in Latin America, they've been making their own parties instead of joining pre-existent major parties. So those are two different approaches. So the best one here, without even having to read the options, is going to be C. All right. So which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence? Okay, so let's start from the top. Several studies have found negligible electoral consequences for governments that impose fiscal austerity measures, yet some European governments recently suffered electorally due to their austerity programs. Evelyn Hubsker and colleagues attribute this incongruity to governments' tendencies to implement austerity programs strategically to avoid electoral costs which has obscured the inherent political risks of austerity measures in the election data scholars have examined. Okay, so this line is telling us that some people, several studies have found negligible electoral consequences for governments that impose fiscal austerity measures, but some European governments recently suffered electorally due to their austerity programs in general. So they weren't really not because of imposing; they were just getting it because of this of austerity programs, and they attribute this incongruity to government's tendencies, um, not followed in the recent European cases, to implement austerity programs strategically to avoid electoral costs. So let's take a look at our options. A. It explains the discrepancy between what has been observed in study settings and what has been observed in real-world settings that the text goes on to assert is attributable to the studies not using real-world data. Okay. B. It identifies a conflict between research findings and research events that the text goes on to suggest is a consequence of a complicating factor in the data used to generate those findings. C. It presents a long-standing divergence in research findings that the text goes on to say is due to different groups of researchers using data that derive from different electoral circumstances. And D. It describes a recent exception to general pattern in research findings that the text goes on to explain as a result of researchers underestimating the significance of inconsistencies in the data they've analyzed. Okay, so the one that's automatically standing out to me is B, because it's saying it identifies a conflict between research findings and recent events, which is true. And it goes on to suggest, the text goes on to suggest, is a consequence of a complicating factor in the data used to generate those findings. So they attribute this incongruity to government tendencies not followed in the recent European cases to implement austerity programs strategically to avoid electoral costs. So right here, this incongruity. So that's it talks about the problem and it tells us what complicating factors used to generate those findings right here, essentially. So therefore, B is going to be our answer. Okay, same thing as the previous one. Same type, I should say. But scholarly accounts of the Chechnya movement tend to focus on the most militant, outspoken figures in the movement, making it seem uniformly radical. Geographer Juan Herrera has shown, however, that if we shift our focus towards the way the movement manifested in comparatively low-profile neighborhood institutions and projects, we see participants espousing an array of political orientations and approaches to community activism. Okay, so let's take a look at our options. A. It presents a trend in scholarship on the Chechnya movement that the text claims has been reevaluated by researchers in light of Herrera's work on the movement's participants. Okay. It identifies an aspect of the Chechnya movement that the text implies was overemphasized by scholars due to their political orientations. It describes a common approach to studying the Chechnya movement that, according to text, obscures the ideological diversity of the movement's participants. It summarizes the conventional method for analyzing the Chechnya movement, which the text suggests creates a misleading impression of the effectiveness of neighborhood institutions and projects. Okay, so the line here says tends to focus on the most militant, outspoken figures in the movement. But right here in the text, we see that if we shift our focus towards the comparatively low-profile neighborhood institutions, we see participations espousing an array of political orientations. So this is essentially contrasting whatever is set up here. So scholars are making it seem more uniformly radical, even though it's not, is what they're trying to say. So in the text, it identifies an aspect of the Chechnya movement that the text implies was overemphasized by scholars due to their own political orientations. It's not the scholars' orientations, so I wouldn't say it's B. It describes a common approach to studying the Chechnya movement that, according to text, obscures the ideological diversity of the movement's participants. I say it's C because it shows a common approach, yes, but it does hide the lower profile neighborhood institutions projects, and therefore it's going to be C as the answer. Okay, this will be the last text structure and purpose question. Okay, so Let's just read the text here. The 1967 release of Harold Cruz's book, The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, isolated him from almost all other scholars and activists of the American Civil Rights Movement. Though many of those thinkers disagree with each other, he nonetheless found ways to disagree with them all. He thought that activists who believed that black people such as himself should culturally assimilate were naive. But he also sharply criticized black nationalists such as Mark Garvey, who wanted to establish independent, self-contained black economies and societies, even though Cruz himself identifies as black nationalist. Okay. So in the text here, we see that he basically disagrees with everyone, right? Like, everyone's ideas here he doesn't like. Like, it clearly says he nonetheless found ways to disagree with them all, right? And he even he even criticized black nationalists, even though he identified as a black nationalist, right? He just didn't like their ideas. So I'm looking through these options here. It describes the direction that Cruz felt the civil rights movement out to take. This sentence doesn't really tell us that, so no. It indicates that Cruz's reputation as a persistent antagonist of other scholars is undeserved. I wouldn't say undeserved here, and the sentence definitely doesn't say that, because it shows that he's literally antagonist, like he's an antagonist to everybody, even other black nationalists. So B can't be it. It describes the controversy that Cruz's work caused within the black nationalist movement. His work isolated him from other scholars, but he was the one that was disagreeing with everyone. It doesn't really show a controversy with his work. It rather shows the controversies he had with other people's ideas and ideologies. So the only one that could make sense here is D. It helps explain Cruz's position with respect to the community of civil rights thinkers. Yeah, it shows his position on other people's ideas here. Okay, I don't like your ideas, literally what he's saying here. He nonetheless found ways to disagree with them all. So therefore, D is going to be our answer. Okay, so that is the text structure and purpose type of questions. These questions are a little more structurally based, so you have to read like you're kind of piecing together a puzzle. Like right here, you want to think of it like an actual essay, I should say. Like, this is the intro, this is the body, this is what he's saying. It's like a little thesis, and you want to break that apart, and you want to basically get the main idea of each few sentences so you can kind of understand the overall idea and the way something is being structured. So yeah, you just really need to look into it, see how the introduction starts, what they're trying to say, like especially for the science type of craft and structure questions. Like the science parts, it's going to start with the methodology, and it's going to tell you some research, it's going to give you results, it's going to give a synthesis, etc. You want to be able to piece that together and also separate that piece by piece so you can pick the proper option. Alright, so today we're going to look at some cross-text connection questions. So again, score band 7 on one prep. So these are the hardest you can probably get here. So yeah, let's get right into it. Okay, so we want to see how the author of text 2 would most likely respond to the assertion made right here. So let's just read what we have so far, right? Growth in the use of novel nanohybrids, materials created from the conjugation of multiple distinct... Okay, wait, so when I'm reading this actually, when you see these two dashes like that, essentially it tells us that this is kind of non-essential information. Like, it's not mandatory for us to read, right? So I'm actually going to skip that part. So growth in the use of novel nanohybrids has outpaced studies of nanohybrids' environmental risks. Unfortunately, risk evaluations based on nanohybrids' constituents are not reliable. Conjugation may alter constituents' physiochemical properties such that innocuous nanomaterials form a nanohybrid that is anything but. Okay, now text 2. The potential for enhanced toxicity of nanohybrids relative to the toxicity of constituent nanomaterials has drawn deserved attention, but the effects of nanomaterial conjugation vary by case. For example, it was recently shown that a nanohybrid of silicon dioxide and zinc oxide preserved by the desired optical transparency of zinc oxide nanoparticles while mitigating the nanoparticles' potential to damage DNA. So, let's take a look at our options. Okay, so A. By concurring that the risk described in text 1 should be evaluated, but emphasizing that the risk is more than offset by the potential benefits of nanomaterial conjugation. Let's see. Proportional risk. Yeah, no, because right here it doesn't really talk about the benefits, and just wouldn't make sense to put that down. B, by arguing that the situation described in text 1 may not be representative, but conceding that the effects of nanomaterial conjugation are harder to predict than researchers had expected. Well, not necessarily, because right here in text 2, in the first line, it shows that they agree essentially, but they're expanding upon it and saying that the effects of nanomaterial conjugation can vary by case. So we're left with C and D here. C is by denying that the circumstances described in text 1 is likely to occur, but acknowledging that many aspects of nanomaterial conjugation are still poorly understood. Doesn't say that exactly, so can't be C. So the only option we're left with D. The only option we're left with here is D. And it looks like that's right, because it says, by agreeing that the possibility described in text 1 is a cause for concern, but pointing out that nanomaterial conjugation does not inevitably produce that result. Yes, because it's saying that the conjugation can vary by case. So therefore D is our answer. Alright, so my thing ended up not recording, so I'm going to go over this again. So I'm going to go over it a little more briefer here, but basically in our two texts here, when the 50-second long film Arrival Train was first shown, right, spectators were naive to see a train appearing to come directly at them, and they leaped from their seats, fled the room, right? And this would mark a major cultural shift. A new way of representing and seeing the world had arrived with that train. Okay. And in text 2, it says there's no real evidence of the first audience of the arrival of train being alarmed, right? But the story hasn't stopped, and this belief is so strong that we invented and keep retelling a founding myth, right, of the before and after. So, A, it is more motivated by perception of the significance of the invention of film than by facts. This could very possibly be it, because it's talking about the perception of new things, but it doesn't really have exact evidence of the fact that, okay, this actually happened when it was first shown, people actually leapt out of their seats, right? Because it clearly says there's no contemporary evidence, meaning no modern evidence, right? B expresses a view about the transformative nature of film that film historians tend to regard as naive. Not really, because it says, which statement about the description of the first showing of the arrival train in text 1. Yes, but you can't just say that the transformative nature is naive, right? It's new. Back then it was contemporary, so not really. It is not based on evidence and reflects film historians' belief that they are more sophisticated than today's audiences. That's not true, because if anything, they were less sophisticated, as it was the first time seeing it. And it reflects a misconception that is widely believed because it captures early film audiences' sense that the new medium was alarming. It was alarming. That's not a misconception, that's truth. But the thing is, we don't have a real factual evidence behind that. What we do know is their perception. So this fact might have been possibly just a perception, not like the first real based evidence thing. So A is going to be our answer. Okay, question 6 here. So, which choice best describes the difference between how the authors of text 1 and text 2 view Barbara Tuchman's The Gun of August? Okay, so text 1. Despite its beautiful prose, The Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman's 1962 analysis of the start of World War I, has certain weaknesses as a work of history. Okay, I'm gonna highlight that part right here. It fails to address events in Eastern Europe just before the outbreak of hostilities, thereby giving the impression that Germany was the war's principal instigator. Had Tuchman consulted secondary works available to her by scholars such as Luigi Albertini, she would have not neglected the influence of events in Eastern Europe on Germany's actions. Okay, text 2. Barbara Tuchman's The Guns of August is an engrossing, if dated, introduction to World War I. Tuchman's analysis of primary documents is laudable, but her main thesis, that European powers committed themselves to catastrophic outcome by refusing to deviate from military plans developed prior to conflict, is implausibly reductive. Okay, so text 1 says it's a weak work and that there are secondary works that she should have referenced. Text 2 says that the main thesis in general is not very good because she refused to deviate from these military plans, right? And she developed prior to the conflict. It's implausibly reductive. Okay, so what's the difference between text 1's thinking and text 2's thinking? So the author of text 1 argues that Tuchman should have relied more on the work of other historians, while the author of text 2 implies that Tuchman's most interesting claims result from her original research. Not necessarily, because right here argues that should have relied more on the work of other historians. Yes, that's true, as she would have not neglected the influence of events in Eastern Europe on Germany's actions. That's right. But the author of text 2 implies that Tuchman's most interesting claims result from her original, original work, right? So that while that could be true, it's that it's implausibly reductive. That's the part where, okay, while that might have been possible, it can't be the possible answer because the text here says it's implausibly reductive, showing a weakness on her main thesis. The author of text 1 believes that the scope of Tuchman's research led her to an incorrect interpretation, while the author of text 2 believes that Tuchman's central argument is overly simplistic. Now, this could be one, because making it implausibly reductive means you're kind of reducing it from how it should be. So it could mean it's overly simplistic. Yes. The author of text 1 asserts that the writing style of The Guns of August makes it worthwhile to read despite any perceived deficiency in Tuchman's research. Already I'm going to stop there because that's not true. It says that it already tells us it's a weakness, and it doesn't tell us it's a worthwhile read at all. It only talks about the cons, right? And the author of text 1 claims that Tuchman would agree that World War I was largely due to events in Eastern Europe. No, because she entirely neglected the influence of events in Eastern Europe. So therefore B is going to be the answer. Alright, so these questions are definitely a mouthful, so this will be the last one on this section here. But yeah, let's get right into it. So which choice best describes how text 1 and text 2 relate to each other? So text 1, the fossil records suggest that mammoths went extinct around 11,000 years ago. In a 2021 study of environmental DNA in the Arctic, Yu-Shen Wang and colleagues found mammoth eDNA in sedimentary layers formed millennia later, around 4 KYR ago. To account for this discrepancy, Joshua H. Miller and Carl Simpson proposed that Arctic temperatures could preserve a mammoth's carcass on the surface, allowing it to leach DNA into the environment for several thousand years. Text 2. Wang and colleagues concede that eDNA contains DNA from both living organisms and carcasses, but for DNA to leach from remains over several millennia requires that the remains be perpetually on the surface. Scavengers and weathering in the Arctic, however, are likely to break down surface remains well before 1,000 years have passed. Okay, so in text 1, we get a study of environment, and they're accounting for some discrepancy. In text 2, Wang and the other colleagues concede something in regards to text 1, and they're trying to say that regardless of this, though, the surface breakdown surface remains 1,000 years before. So A says text 1 discusses two approaches to studying mammoth extinction without advocating for either, whereas text 2 advocates for one approach over the other. No, because there's no exact approach here in text 2 that's actually even being stated. It's just telling us what's probably going to happen. Text 1 presents findings by Wang and colleagues and gives another research team's attempt to explain those findings, whereas text 2 provides additional details that calls the explanation into question. C. Text 1 describes Wang and colleagues' study and a critique of their methodology, where text 2 offers additional details showing the methodology to be sound. Text 1 argues that new research has undermined the standard view of when mammoths were extinct, whereas text 2 suggests a way to reconcile the standard view with that new research. So, right here, it doesn't essentially offer additional details. It just kind of explains. Okay, it does, but it doesn't in terms of the methodology to be sound, because they're conceding some facts from their previous research. So C is right. That calls the explanation to question, though, makes sense because they are conceding that eDNA contains DNA from both living organisms and carcasses. So that's why B is going to be the answer. Alright, that is it for the cross-text connection questions. So just want to make a brief summary here of how you should be looking at cross-text connection questions. I know I didn't really teach anything here. I was just kind of walking through the questions here. So even for me, I hate reading these. You could see that sometimes I was kind of going back and forth on a choice, because you need to make sure you read specific things here. Like for here, if I didn't read the concede that eDNA contains DNA from both living organisms and carcasses, I would have not gotten B. You need to read A, see what it's overall saying, and read text 2, B, and see what it's overall saying. So like, essentially, you need to summarize what each text is saying, and for this question, you want to see how they relate to each other. So you want to summarize both and see how they're relating to each other. So yeah, that's how you solve these type of questions. Okay, yeah, that's a little over an hour so far. This is part 1 of the Mega SAT prep. Um, Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below and what specific topics you want to see next. I will be just doing more topics in general. Geometry for one, some command of evidence like central ideas, and other things too like rhetorical synthesis and transition type of questions. So I'll just be covering everything that I haven't already covered. But yeah, if there's anything in specific you guys would like me to cover, just let me know in the comments down below. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and best of luck on the SAT here.